you could leave life right now, let that determine what you say and do and think. Let's be clear. One day, you're going to die. The moment you were born, you were given a death sentence. Now, if this horrible and shocking and, quite frankly, morbid statement has shocked you, then this is exactly what you need to be hearing right now. Because one of two things will have happened upon hearing that. It will have either terrified you or it will have inspired you. In Stoic philosophy, and the Stoics are a little bit obsessed with death. In Stoic philosophy, there is a saying, Memento Mori, which means, remember, you will die. And the Stoics, they were a little bit obsessed with death, but they like to remind themselves about the fact that they had a limited amount of time on the planet, because to them, it was an inspiration to then live life in the way that they wanted to be living their life. It essentially directed their moral compasses in the right direction. By listening on, you will learn why death and the fact that you will die one day should be an inspiration to you, how you can use it as an inspiration, and how to live your life in the way that you want to be living your life when you actually get down to the brass tacks of it. I'd like you to imagine right now that you are on your deathbed. For some reason, you're literally about to die. You've got minutes to live. And I want you to think about the things that you wish you'd done less of in life. I mean, do you really think that those hours scrolling through TikTok mindlessly was time well spent? Do you honestly wish you'd allowed all of the little things that worked you up and bothered you? Do you really wish you'd let that affect your tranquility? Do you honestly wish you'd had more arguments with people? The answer to all of that is probably not. So, what do you wish you'd done more of? You're on your deathbed, you're about to die. What do you wish you'd done more of? Perhaps you'd spent more time with your family. Perhaps you'd rather spend more of your money on the charitable causes that you believe in. Perhaps you would have had less nights out, more like nights in. What would you have done differently if you were on your deathbed and thinking back upon your life right now? The answers that you've come up with, maybe you've actually gone into that and paused and reflected upon it, or whether you've not, but it's a good thing to do. Those answers give you a very stark, honest, and complete idea of how you want to actually live your life. Because you're not on your deathbed right now, or hopefully you're not. But death could strike at any moment. And I don't say this to be morbid or, pessimistic, but you are going to die one day, and people die in tragic accidents. They just go like that. All of a sudden they get a horrible diagnosis, something tragic happens. People die all the time without, a lot of people die, and that wasn't in their plans on that day. They didn't wake up and go, today's the day, and it happens. It can happen at any random moment. So you are going to die. But knowing that is your inspiration, because that limited amount of time that you've got and those answers about what you wish you'd done less of and what you could wish you could do more of are how you actually want to be living your life. And that's how you should live it moving forwards. Possibly this sounds like the most morbid and, frankly, downbeat video I've ever heard, but it is not at all. This is your inspiration. I'm sure you've heard stories of people having near-death experiences, and following from that, they start to live their life completely differently. During a near-death experience, the Grim Reaper grabs people by the throat, slaps them across the face, and then just adds a little bit more sand to their hourglass. But more importantly, it makes them take stock of what is actually important to them in their life. Now, this might be devoting more time to charitable causes. This might be being more selfish. It might be being less selfish. It might be just putting their time into different things. Maybe it's the thing that they need in order to start going after the goals that they've always wanted to do in life. Now, be honest, does having that happen, like being focused on those things, really sound like a bad thing at all? The beautiful thing about death and the idea of death in your mind is that it forces you to concentrate on life and the time that you have left and living it in the correct way according to you. I want to be absolutely clear because people misunderstand this. Like you hear, oh, I could die at any minute, I might as well, adopt the YOLO, you only live once attitude, go out and party hard and sleep with random people and say all the horrible things that you wish you'd said to someone like who had wronged you. It's not about that at all, because yes, you could die at any moment, but you also are more likely to not die at any moment, so that when you wake up the following day with a hangover, with the injuries and with the horrible text messages from all the people you've hurt, you understand that, you do all the YOLO stuff, but that has consequences. So this isn't about going out and partying hard. This is about having your moral compass set in the right place. Because is that how you really want to live your life? If you were on your deathbed, would you look back and go, oh, I wish I'd hurt more people's feelings? Do I wish I'd slept with more random people? Do I wish that I'd done this or that or the other? I think not. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius has one of the most beautiful quotes about death, and it is the following: you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you say and do and think. The idea of death being potentially just one bad decision away should give us laser focus to concentrate on our lives and what's important in them. But death is scary. There are 3 reasons I can think of why people have a massive resistance to the idea that their life is going to be over at some point in the future. Firstly is the finality of it. Secondly is the idea of it being completely unknown. You don't know what's going to happen following your death. And thirdly is the idea of leaving the people behind who care about you, and the grief that they will suffer and how much they will miss you. So those are the 3 reasons that I can think of why people find death and the idea of death so scary. So let's talk about them. Yes, death is final. We die and we leave this world, and literally no one knows what happens after that point. We know that death is final when we leave. After that, it's only theory. So we know we're not going to be here anymore. We don't know where we're going to be after that, if anywhere, but we know we're not going to be here anymore. So that is kind of the final part of it, and we're going to be more than likely grieved for as well. More on that in a minute. So given that we know death is going to happen, and we don't know what's going to happen afterwards, is there any point in fighting the idea of death itself? Instead, perhaps the reminder of the fact that it is final should be a stark reminder to use the sand that's left in our hourglass and live our life in the most appropriate way for us. But then, what about the unknown? That's the second thing I said. You don't know what's going to happen, and that's a little bit terrifying. But the only way to know what's going to happen is to die. And given that you don't want to die, you see where I'm going with this? The only way to know is to die, and you don't want to die, so you might as well live your life whilst you're not dying, and you will find out about what happens upon your death. It's almost like there's a living version of you and a dead version of you, and the dead version of you has to be concerned about what happens after you stop living. The living version of you should concentrate on life and living life in the way that you want to be living life. Now on to the final part, and this is the hardest one, and it's a really, really difficult idea for people to get their heads around, and it's something that people will actively avoid thinking about. And this is the idea that when you die, you are going to be leaving people behind who love you. And particularly if you've got children, I have children, and the idea of leaving them and them having to cope with the trauma and the upset and the grief of me not being there is genuinely heartbreaking. It really, really is. And I think that it's a really difficult idea to think of the fact that you won't be here anymore. If you're a good person, and even if you're not, you will have left an imprint on so many people's lives by the way in which you've lived and the way in which you've interacted and the experiences you've had together. And as a natural result of that, people will grieve when you pass. And you quite rightly will think, well, how will they be able to cope? Will they be overwhelmed? And the answer is yes. They will be overwhelmed. When losing someone very close to you, grief is an all-powerful emotion which saps the energy from you, and It kills you inside. It honestly does. As I'm sure most of you listening are aware, it's horrendous, but we endure, and it's bad, and it's bad, and it's bad, and it's bad, and as time passes, it becomes a little bit easier. But just think of the fact that, yes, of course you don't want to leave your children. Of course you don't want anyone around you to be living, like, you don't want them to be experiencing grief because of your death. But there are billions, literally billions of people who have died and left people behind. They have left behind children, parents, brothers, sisters, cousins, work colleagues, and all those people have been okay. It's horrible. Grief is a part of life. It's an awful part of life, but it's also something which is really, really important to do, to go through that grieving process. So yes, it's awful that you will die and leave these people behind, but those people will be okay, just like everyone else who's suffered loss eventually is okay. It hurts a lot, but they endure. Just going to take a quick break from this episode. I really hope that you're enjoying it, but I wanted to remind you that if you're an anxiety sufferer, then I do have an anxiety toolkit which has all of my best content about overcoming anxiety. There's a link in the show notes below. Sign up for that. Back to me talking about Memento Mori, remembering that you will die and finding the joy in your mortality. There's actually a really beautiful and poignant quote from Marvel's WandaVision. Don't know if you've seen that on Disney Plus. And Vision says, "What is grief if not love persevering?" And like that, when I first heard that, that genuinely moved me. I thought, wow, that is such a beautiful and succinct way of explaining what grief is like. Your loved ones will want to hold you, talk to you, experience new things with you, do things with you. They'll think of you when they're in places where you used to go together, and they'll want to have conversations with you. They will be throwing out all of this love, all of this desire to be with you again, and you're not going to be there to kind of requite those desires that they have. And that is, it hurts. The idea of that really, really hurts. But there's a very simple solution to it. During life, cut yourself off. Stop talking to your children. Stop talking to your parents. Just cut everyone off. Run away. Get rid of all of your responsibilities entirely, and just cut yourself off from the world. Because the less loved you are during life, the less you'll be grieved for. Now, if you're a piece of shit, if you're a terrible person, and people just not really going to miss you very much, then they're not going to grieve so much. So that's a very, very simple way to live life in a really bad way and just distance yourself from everyone. And therefore, when you die, the grieving process is easier for everyone. Isn't that great? Well, no, of course it's not. All it does is it moves the pain that the grieving pain, if you will, good. It moves that into the present, into their lives right now. If you are an awful person to your children, to people around you, they're gonna be so hurt by that, and then they're also probably going to grieve anyway. So cutting yourself off and doing that, living that life in that way, yeah, it makes the grieving process slightly easier for them, but also you're going to be putting that pain on them in the present, and you're going to know about that pain as you're kind of putting it upon them. So what's your choice going to be? Are you going to live your life in the best way possible and create beautiful and incredible relationships with the people around you, and who are going to love you, and you're going to love them back, and you have wonderful times and experiences together, which means that you get grieved for really hard? Or are you going to be a piece of shit who gets grieved for slightly less? I mean, this is complete hyperbole, but I think you get the point that yes, the grieving process is going to be bad for people, but that's only because you're going to have been so loved in life if you're living your life in the best way that you feel like you can live it. Conclusion on remembering that you'll die. I think it's really important to have a clear idea in your head that you have a limited amount of time on the planet, and you should use that time in the most effective way possible. And it doesn't have to take a near-death experience or a terminal diagnosis for you to kind of flip the switch in your head and start living life in that way. It's very, very simple to actually change the way that you view life by just making 2 lists. And just going back to the kind of the deathbed example, is to just think about the end of your life and imagine being there and going, right, make 2 lists. List 1, what do I wish I'd done less of in life? And just make a list of all the things that you feel are a waste of your time. So whether that's little arguments, whether that's scrolling through TikTok, whether that's letting go of people's opinions. Now this is a big thing. If you were going to die tomorrow, would you give a shit of what him or her or whoever thought about you or said about you? Absolutely not. Because once you have a realization of how short your time is, that actually becomes a lot easier to go, you know what, I'm going to die tomorrow, so I don't care what you think. Now, you're probably not going to die tomorrow, but why not adopt exactly the same attitude as if you were going to? So, yeah, I'm going to die at some point and I want to live my life in the best way possible. So all these people who I don't respect, I'm going to stop caring what they think. I'm going to let go of their opinions, because why should I care about what they think? Other things you might want to do less of: holding grudges, spending money on material things. I wish I'd spent less time worrying, complaining about life, judging other people, and whatever else. So make a list of all the things that you would like to do less of. If you've been through your life and you're at the end, what do you wish you'd done less of? That's list 1. List 2, because I have a limited amount of time on the planet, I wish I had done more of, and then make your list. So I wish I'd spent more time with my family. I wish I'd spent more time pursuing the goals that are important to me. I wish I'd been more selfish. I wish I'd been less selfish. Either works. I wish I'd spent more time living in the present moment rather than worrying about the future. I wish I'd given out more forgiveness. That's an interesting one. Once you have your 2 lists, it's very clear now what you want to do less of with your life and what you want to do more of. Let the fact that you have a limited amount of time on the planet inspire you to do less of the things that you want to do less of, more of the things you want to do more of, and let that limited amount of time be your inspiration to find joy in your mortality. Now, this has been an interesting thing for me to create. It's started off as a blog, which I'm obviously now recording for you to listen to. And it's an interesting concept, the idea of our own death. And I appreciate that this can come across as depressing and morbid, but this really, really is the opposite of my intention. No, it's not nice to think about death, but we're only thinking about death to help us enjoy and appreciate life more, because being grateful and being grounded in the places where we are right now is one of the key components of improving yourself and having quality self-development. So I appreciate this has perhaps been dark and morbid, but I really hope that it does inspire you to live your life in the way that you want to live your life. If you're interested in finding out how you can live your life on the terms that you want to live it, then why not book in a completely free exploratory call with me? There's a link in the show notes below. Let's have a chat about things. Let's get you living your life in the way that you want to live it.